Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of our New View Continuing Education. We host classes throughout the entire week, but every Tuesday during lunchtime. Today's topic is advantages of investing in notes. I'm your host, Jason DeBono. I'm going to walk you guys through exactly kind of how this works and how this looks inside a retirement account. As been here with the company for going on 18 years here in the next month. So been fortunate to do a variety of things, but the thing that got me into self-direction as a personal investor originally was notes. And so I've got a pretty vast background in terms of things that we've done and investments that we've made, both in my own retirement accounts, but also over the last 18 years, being able to kind of see what our clients have been doing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So as we go through this, if you guys do have questions, get them typed in. Those questions will eventually make their way up to the screen here, and we'll be able to get those answered out loud for you. So without further ado, we'll dig right into it. For those that haven't been on one of our classes before, we have the same disclaimer on every single one, and it's not a disclaimer to tell you, what we don't do. It's actually a disclaimer to help you understand what we do. NewView does not in any way recommend, endorse, or approve investments. We are a passive third-party custodian of retirement accounts, and as a result, we give you, the client, the ability to invest in whatever it is that you see fit. We're going to talk today about what the rules are and where the boundaries are, but the fact is you can buy notes, you can invest in notes, you can buy notes on the secondary market. There's lots of things that we can do, and we're going to go through that today. But just to understand, everything we talk about is an educational component. We are not here to tell you what to buy, when to buy, where to buy, or whether it's a good or bad investment. That is the self and self-direction, and you get to make that declaration and decision on your own. So what is a self-directed IRA? Well, it's very simple. It's an IRA in which the account owner gets to direct all investments. Now, you can self-direct your IRA at Schwab or Fidelity, both great companies, but they're only going to allow your account to invest into traditional securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. What a truly self-directed account does is it gives you the ability to invest outside of the market and into non-traditional investments. We'll talk about them as a whole, but the three most common asset classes our clients invest into are real estate, notes, and private equity, right? And all of those certainly have some overlap. So the reason that we talk about the power of IRAs is that if you take a look at the screen here, there are really two different types of investors. There are investors that invest for return, and there are investors that invest for return and tax efficiency. And we're going to focus on how we become that latter. How do we focus on return and tax efficiency? So as you can see, both of these are the exact same investment over the exact same amount of investment horizon or time. And they both start with the exact same amount of money. So this takes $1 and doubles it. The column on the left, which is the more sizable sum of just over $1 million, is what happens when you make that investment in a tax-advantaged account, right? Traditional Roth, Simple SEP, any of these retirement accounts we're going to talk about. The one on the right is the same investment made with personal money, taxed at a rate of 25% annually. Now, your tax rate may be higher or lower than that, but at the end of the 20-year period, you can clearly see the difference between having $72,000 and having $1,045,000. Now, the reason that we go through this and talk about this is because I want everyone to really understand how the wealthy stay wealthy or how the rich get wealthy. They make the same investments that most common people do. They're not great investors. Sometimes they can be, but they keep all of the returns because they use tax advantages any opportunity they can. So the same dollar invested over the same time horizon in the same exact investment will yield you $1 million more over a 20-year period just by not paying tax. So if you are unsure how taxes eat away at your returns, just take a simple look here at the column on the right, and you can see the difference as you start going down this where taxes come out, and I've only got $1.75 to reinvest as opposed to $2. And as we go down, that gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So when we talk about a self-directed IRA, it's not just a tool to buy investments outside the market. That's fantastic. That's the investment piece. But an IRA in and of itself is the greatest tax tool available to us today. And the fact that we here at NewView can help you couple that great tax tool and your investment strategy to include non-traditional or alternative investments is a match made in heaven. And that's obviously where we want to see our clients work towards. So some of the biggest benefits, right? Diversity. What are you really doing for diversity? How can you get your retirement account spread amongst asset classes? What I love about notes is notes for me is the easiest way to obtain diversity because I can invest smaller amounts over more notes. I can invest smaller amounts over more notes over different asset classes or different geographic areas. So diversity doesn't mean I have to go buy different investments, but I can write loans to different people of different credit scores, of different backgrounds, of different geographics, of different collateral. All of those things represent a level of diversity. We've already touched on this one. The tax savings are immense. If you are unaware of the tax benefits of your IRA, take some time and truly understand it. It will help you put more money into it and use it as a better tool. And then the third piece here, and the thing that I love, is you can invest in what you know best. Okay? I am I would say not a full-time real estate investor by any stretch of the imagination, but I like investing in real estate. I have over the time I've been here at NewView. But I love notes. Doesn't mean I don't love real estate, but I love notes because notes to me are the simplest form of investment for me to understand. Now, maybe you'll feel the same way after we talk through it. But what I love about notes is there's no other investment class that I'm aware of in the alt space that gives you a predetermined return. So I know what that coupon or yield or interest rate is. And it gives me to adjust my risk up or down very easily. So when I look at a private note, I can write a loan to somebody, right? I can determine their credit score. I can see their income. I can go through and vet them out and then assign an interest rate or return associated with that. That level of risk-adjusted returns for me is the easiest thing to not only understand, but it's also what I think one of the easiest ways to ensure that I get my money back, right? I want to make money, but as Warren Buffett said, return of principal is always greater than return on principal. So for those reasons, notes to me just make great sense. So what kinds of plans can you invest into notes? Well, you have what we call the personal accounts. These are personal IRAs, your traditional and your Roth. These are accounts that you set up against your income, and they allow you to contribute annually. There are also some employer plans. Employer plans allow individuals to save money through their employer and then make investments into the account. Come see wherever you like. And employer plans, right? SEP IRA, individual 401k or solo 401k, as well as the simple IRA. Inside that 401k, there's also a Roth component, which means we pay taxes up front. We're not here to go through the plans in too great a detail. There's plenty of content that we deliver on the plans themselves. But all of these plans can be self-directed. Two of my favorite accounts, right, that exist is the health savings account and the Collateral education account. Again, we have a lot of education on all of these plans. I love these accounts because they allow me to save for health expenses, which is the HSA, and they allow us to save for our kids' educational expenses through the Collateral. What's really cool is all of these can be self-directed. So I just recently had a note payoff that I had made about a year ago. I made that note investment out of my 401k, out of my traditional, because I have both Roth and traditional, my son and daughter's ESA account, and my HSA. So 5 different parties loan money to someone secured by real estate at a rate of 10% interest, which was great, all payable back. It was a 1-year term. It extended for a few months before it closed. But it was such a great investment that got to be divided up between a variety of different accounts that we have in control. So I share that because I want you to kind of be thinking about what are these other accounts that we may have that are we using and getting full value out of. So most people may think, well, I don't have enough money in my health savings account to self-direct it because it's only got $8,000 in it. Well, if you put that $8,000 against other accounts that have the money too, you can divide up ownership. So definitely something worth taking a look at, but I'd encourage you to take a hard look at these specialty plans if you don't already have one set up, and look at self-directing those as well. So when we talk about notes in a retirement account, we have to make sure, like any investment made in a retirement account, that we understand what the rules are and that we're following the rules. So if you remember my slide on that dollar doubling, right, every single year, and the difference between not being taxed and being taxed was nearly $1 million. The IRS, because of that tax treatment of your retirement account, puts a pretty good thick fence around it and says, your retirement account can be an investor, it can make passive investments, it can generate return, all of which falls under the same tax-free growth guidelines as any other IRA, whether it owns stocks and bonds or whether it owns real estate. That's the great part. What they further say is that if you're going to maintain that tax treatment, then that IRA cannot invest directly or indirectly with you or most of your personal affairs, right? So what that means is my IRA cannot write me a loan. And the IRS says, well, think about it. If I wanted to pull money out of my IRA, what would I do? I'd write a loan at very little or no interest, right? And then I'd be basically taking money out of my account for free. Well, that would violate the tax treatment. The second would be if I wanted to pump money into my IRA, I would take a loan. And in this case, I'd pay a premium, 30% interest, 40% interest, which would be a way for me to push more money into my account. So the IRS says, we're not going to let you try to pull money out or put money in. We're just going to draw a line and say, you must be a passive investor in everything you do in your IRA, just like when you buy stocks. And you cannot in any way transact with yourself, right? Your spouse, your parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, spouses, and businesses of those parties. So for example, my IRA could not write my son a loan because of the same arm's length issue they'd be concerned about. So when we make investments through our retirement accounts, everything has to be arm's length. Arm's length means that there is no close familiar relationship with the parties as defined. And then number two, it means that the terms of the deal are at market rates. Now, we're not here to be the police, judge, and jury on what market rates are, but it is important for you, if you're going to do business with someone, write a loan, that you understand what those boundaries are. Right? So we see all kinds of deals and all kinds of investments and all kinds of returns. But the key thing is that you always want to be able to stand up in front of the IRS if they ever ask and say, yes, this is the terms, these are the deal, this is an unrelated party, and it's two people at a fair market rate. As long as you can check those boxes, it's infinite in terms of what you can do inside a retirement account. So we talked already about this, right? Make sure that you're maintaining an arm's length status in that transaction. That means that you personally, nor any of your close family members, have any benefit to gain from that investment. Doesn't mean that the investment can't go up or generate return, and that, yes, does benefit you, but it actually benefits the retirement account. What they're looking for is, are you using your IRA to try to benefit yourself? So, for example, my IRA couldn't write my business a loan because that would benefit me personally. No matter what the interest rate is, the IRS says you just can't do it. Okay? So when it comes to self-direction, make sure that you are maintaining that arm's length relationship between the parties that your retirement account is investing into. Now, I get people all the time that say, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And I think to myself, you do that every day on the stock market. You get no personal benefit. Every transaction is arm's length when you buy stocks with your retirement account. So why would you settle for an investment that you don't think is as good as what you could do simply for the sake of arm's length? So we get this a lot. We did not create the rules. It is not our jobs to be the judge and jury and police of these rules, but we do believe in self-direction. We've helped tens of thousands of clients use their retirement money to invest outside the market and generate better returns. That's what this is a tool for. If you're looking for this to be a tool to get money in or out of your IRA or evade taxes in a non-legal way, this just isn't a good tool, right? The opportunity is too great in what you can do to get yourself in trouble. And that slide there, you can go back and look at that. It's just a list of all the things that I shared in terms of who's disqualified. right? So just make sure this is buying, selling, trading goods and services, extending credited services, all of which would be considered prohibited. If your retirement account buys from unrelated parties, loans to unrelated parties, rents to unrelated parties, sells to unrelated parties, regardless of asset class, you can do ultimately whatever you want inside a retirement account. But if you're going to get close to the flame being that familial relationship, then you're going to want to be careful, right, that you're engaging in a transaction that the IRS would not take any issue with. Last thing is no life insurance, no collectibles. Pretty straightforward. No life insurance, no collectibles. The reason they don't want you buying life insurance is because your retirement account is to benefit you when you retire. Your life insurance benefits your heirs when you pass away, right? It just doesn't go in line with their intent. Collectibles are prohibited because there's no real value to a collectible. It's what someone else is willing to pay. And the IRS doesn't want you holding assets where the value can be dictated so easily in an arbitrary manner. Now, you can make a case, a real estate deal is only worth what someone will pay, or a note, or a private equity. But there's markets where they can go and look and get a feel. So for example, if I went back 5 years and I just looked at this office building, I could get a pretty good idea 5 years ago what this building traded at. What's it worth? What was the rents? What was the income? All of those things. I could never do that for a collectible. So the IRS has no real way to go back and look at collectibles and actually determine if someone violated the rules, right? So for that reason, no collectibles. So why invest in private notes? Now, I'm going to give you some of this as my personal opinion. Some of this is what we hear from our clients. Some of this is just some things that we've seen. But when we say why invest in private notes, it's a question to ask yourself, but we'll do our best to answer the why. So number one of my favorite things is I set the terms, right? You've probably heard the saying, he who has the gold makes the rules. Well, if you want to borrow my money, I get to determine what the rules are. If I want to set it at a certain credit score, a certain type of property, a certain length, a minimum interest rate, all of those things I can do, right? I get to determine who my borrower is. I get to determine what I'm loaning against. I get to determine what the collateral is. So when you kind of look at all of these things, those are all choices I get to make. So I probably turn down 5 loans, 10 loans for every loan that I do. Why? Because the other 5 to 9 don't meet my criteria. And that's my money, my choice. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I know people that would write loans on some of the ones I turned down. And I know people that probably wouldn't write against some of the ones I do write against. So the beauty is it's in the eye of the beholder. But as I mentioned earlier, it's the only asset class where I can review the borrower, review the collateral, so I can determine my return, determine who's going to generate that return for me, and determine what my protection is in terms of collateral. I get to make all those choices. And I get to adjust the return accordingly. So from that standpoint, it makes great sense. If you're out buying notes, right? Buying notes is great. Similar to buying investments and issuing a loan, you get to decide on the terms. So you can actually buy an existing note. I do this many, many times. And you can buy them at discounts. Now, I have people all the time that say, why would someone sell you a note at a discount? Well, it depends. Number one, they sell at a discount because the note is illiquid. If it's a 5-year loan being paid monthly, then whoever's holding that paper has to hold it for 5 years. Whereas if I buy it, they get all their cash up front. So I can buy it at a discount and generate return. The second thing sometimes is interest arbitrage, which in a normal environment, may or may not be as opportunistic, but when interest rates rise and fall and rise and fall as quickly as they have, you have the ability to create some interest arbitrage. So inside of that interest arbitrage, the ability for people to capture that on the buy side or sell side is a huge advantage. So there are notes out in the marketplace today that maybe it's $100,000 face value that someone would sell you for $90,000. Now the interest rate may only be 6% on it. Well, we know that the market may be worth more today. But if I buy it for $90,000 and they owe me $100,000, that's a 10% return. plus my 6% interest. So buying notes and being able to buy them at face value for the interest alone, or potentially buying them at a discount, can be a big advantage. The other thing on buying notes is that you can buy distress notes. Distress notes are notes where the borrower of that note may be in trouble. And it's what I love about distress notes is that it depends on what trouble is, and it depends on how much I have to pay for that note. But if I buy a note that's in default where the borrower has stopped making payments, but I only pay 30% of the value, right? Now I can go negotiate with that borrower and say, hey, pay me half the money that you borrowed and we'll call it good, right? Well, I only paid 30% for it, so if I get 50% back, that's a great deal. Whereas the previous owner's trying to get 100% of their money back. So the other thing is a lot of people don't like dealing with distressed notes. It's like troubled real estate assets. So there's a lot of opportunity. The second thing in notes that I absolutely love, and this is something that if you're not familiar with, you should be, and that is the value of collateral backing up the loan. Now, one of the reasons why I love Selfdirection is because I can buy investments that I have control over, right? I don't think stocks are bad at all. But if I look at the market today, right, why is it going up or going down? We just hit this debt ceiling thing that we signed. What's the next thing tomorrow? We went through bank challenges. What's the next thing tomorrow? You know, there's always a flavor of the month. Well, how in the world can I ever be out in front of that? Right? So I'm at the mercy of the market. There's no backstop for me. If I look at alternative assets like real estate, I know what I can rent that property for, right? I can see that day one by looking at the market. Now, market conditions change, but typically in real estate, they don't change every week like they do in the stock market. On the loan side, what I love about loans is that I actually can get collateral. So think about this. Where else can you go and get an investment return that's predetermined, that has a clear return that you're going to be paid over a certain period of time, with terms that you can read, review, and understand who's the borrower, all these things. And by the way, if they don't pay you, you have collateral. That means you get the best of both worlds. And if the collateral is good, the incentive for the borrower to pay is higher, right? So when we look at collateral, it's that backstop to an investment. And so you're giving yourself all the upside opportunity and protecting the downside risk. Now, there's no guarantees in any investment. There's notes that can lose money. There's notes that can go bad. But if you do your homework right and you vet out the borrower correctly and you set the terms correctly and you adjust the risk meter up and down and you ensure sufficient collateral, then from a lending standpoint, you can be in one of the safest positions you could be in. So when we talk about collateral, the whole concept here is simply a backstop. It's backstopping that investment so that in the event that your borrower stops paying, you have something to take action against. Right? Collateral is a very powerful thing. If you invest into a public equity and they stop paying a dividend, you have nothing to do but just wait. If their business slows down or any of those things, you got no backstop. Here, you've got backstop. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that you guys should be considering. This is a top 10 list. This is an old list. It's been put together from a variety of sources, but this is something that for this list, these are all things that I personally look at when executing a loan. Now, some of these may be super straightforward. Some of them may not. Number one, have documents created by legal counsel. Right? We see this a lot. People will go online and they'll Google, right? They know each other, and so they'll Google, promissory note, and they'll just draw it up between two parties. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that in a lot of cases. What I've learned, having been doing this for the last nearly 20 years, is that deals are great until they're not. And having terms in an agreement is not for when things are good. It's for when things go bad, and I've seen it. And I'll give you some examples of things I've personally seen with our clients that happen. So having the note drawn up by legal ensures that all the necessary steps to put this deal in the right place, make sure all the terms are there, are correct. Failing to do so could mean that you have to foreclose, you have to take legal action, and you may not have an enforceable note. Was it signed by the right parties? Was it reviewed? Did it need to be notarized? Was that required? What is the state that you're residing in? Is it the state of the lender or the state of the borrower? It doesn't matter. All these things that when you really start thinking about it, scratching your head, it matters. And it may not matter in a perfectly normal scenario where the borrower pays the note off, but when they don't, it's a real issue. Second thing, and just so you know, every loan that I've ever done, these top 2 bullets, any fees that I incur, legal, administrative, custodial, are always paid by the borrower, right? If you've ever taken out a loan, a car loan, you pay for everything, right? Why would we treat it differently today? You pay for it all. This is what it costs for me to loan you the money. I'm not going to be out, right? Monitor payments. This is one that we see all the time. Oh, I didn't realize that because the payments are coming to us, we're just depositing them. We're like a bank account. I don't know if they were supposed to pay on the 1st and they paid on the 1st. I don't know if this check is from 4 months ago or from today, right? We just know that somebody's, right, this borrower sent a check for $1,000 to be paid. But monitor this stuff. If you get a monthly payment, make sure it's paid monthly. If you get a quarterly payment, make sure it's paid quarterly. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people, clients, and they've said, oh, I didn't realize that he or she was that far behind. It happens, and it's easy to do. Just because it's your retirement plan, yes, make it passive, make it less hands-on, but it doesn't mean that you can just disregard it for a long period of time. Monitor late notices and initiate collection actions, right? If your borrower is not paying, there should be fees associated with that. Once they hit the point of being able to take action, right? We're going to talk a little bit about these next couple ones here in a bit. Foreclose as required. Do not handle the foreclosure process yourself. Hire an attorney, right? It matters. There's a process that has to be followed, and if you misstep through the process, you start all over again, or you lose judgment, right? Pay the attorney the necessary cost. And then initiate the payoff notice signed by us. So hopefully, right, in a normal environment, you write the loan, all the payments are made, it's closed off, you sign off that says, yes, it's been paid off in full, and any liens or satisfactions are recorded to offset that. So these are just some things that you're responsible for, but I want to talk to you about some things to consider, right? So we kind of understand we got some areas of responsibility, but these are things that should be part of your due diligence process. Number 1, do not loan if you would not owe, right? This is one. So my dad, I love him to death, but he asks all the time about, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And we've partnered on a few deals. And he has said to me, if you think it's good, I'm good with it. And I said, nope, you're not putting that on me. I'm not your financial advisor. It's good for my money, but I don't know if it's good for your money. And he said, well, we go back and forth. So I would always say one thing. I would say, you don't have to understand all the terms of the deal, but I'm going to ask one simple question. Look at the property that we're loaning against. Look at the amount that we're loaning. And I want you to answer this question. Would you buy that house for that price? Because if you would, you may end up actually owning it for that price. If you look and say, no, I would never want to own that property, then it doesn't matter. You shouldn't be in the deal. I don't care how good the terms are. And this is what I love about having clear and concise underwriting guidelines, right? You can easily get attracted. And this is what lenders get themselves in trouble, and lenders where they're really disciplined, they find great success. It's easy to get attracted and say, oh, it's a really good borrower. So yes, I don't really like the loan, but let me do it. Well, you got to have a good borrower and you got to have a good asset. If they're both not in your wheelhouse, one or the other, you can't do it. So do not loan if you're going to own. This is something for those of you that are considering or are writing loans for people that are rehabbing properties, right? So the way a lot of these rehab loans work is there's a loan amount, and that loan includes an after repaired value. So it's a property where I'm going to loan 150 grand, and the after repaired value is, let's call it 200. But the value today is only 100, right? And 50 of that is for repairs. Pay for your repairs after work has been done. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but this is something that I put into every loan I've ever done, is that I issue any of the payments for improvements in installments. So if you need 100 grand to buy the property for 100 grand, you'll get your 100 grand. The 50 grand for work, I'll pay you in $10,000 increments, but you're going to have to go do some work and let me go see it. Then I'll give you 10 grand. Do the next bit of work, I'll go inspect it and give you 10 grand. The reason that I do that is because, especially in a market today that's trading a little bit sideways, what if they do crappy work? What if they don't complete the work, right? I loaned against after repaired value, but if that money is squandered or it's not used very well, I have no way of ensuring that my asset is going to cover my loan. Now, I'm not telling you have to do it, but I would consider it, right? It's very easy to do. And then let them go out and put a little bit of sweat equity into that property. And then you feel more comfortable paying for actual repairs rather than giving money hoping repairs get done. Do not loan unless you're willing to foreclose. Now, this is different than do not loan if you're willing to own, right? Had a client, long time friend. He was the best man in the person he loaned the money to his wedding. Loaned money, everything was good, right? Market went sideways back in 2008, right? Things were not, he stopped paying. This guy gave him all the time in the world. Wouldn't foreclose because it was his best buddy. Wouldn't foreclose. Guess what ended up happening? By the time he finally accepted that this guy was never going to pay him back, he foreclosed on a property that was worthless. If something's going wrong, address it head on quickly. It's a business, right? Act now. Not later. Act now. I'm not saying don't work with borrowers. I'm not saying don't be compassionate. I'm not suggesting that you don't find middle ground, but I am telling you, borrowers will tell you everything they need to keep the clock going, right? But actions are what you have to measure against. This is your money. And if you've got a $50,000 loan on a property and the borrower is saying, oh, I'll pay you next month, like, well, that may not be good enough. And if you wait too long, right, you may never see that money again. Collect at least interest monthly. I see this a lot. Oh, well, we'll just do a balloon loan. A balloon loan? So you're going to loan someone money for 3 years and wait 3 years to get a payment? So you have no idea if that loan's in good or bad shape for 3 full years. I'm not saying you can't do it. New View, we require at least one annual interest payment, right? But to me, why wouldn't I want to be paid monthly? Now, I've done deals where you defer some payments for the first few months, right? There's things are trying to get off the ground. I can have a common sense approach to managing the project, but to just write a loan without an understanding that money's going to at least come in every month, if the borrower can't afford to pay me a monthly fee of just interest, can they afford the loan? In my opinion, no. And I've had investors that have said things like, I'm one of the most successful investors. I'm like, great. Then you have plenty of money to make an interest payment monthly. You can't have it both ways. You know, some of these loans, it's like $300, $400 a month. We're not talking about a king's ransom. If you can't pay me $400 because the deal's too tight, I don't want to be part of the deal, right? So don't be scared to create the terms. It's your money, your terms. The borrower will conform, or the borrower can find a new lender, right? But don't change your underwriting goals and guidelines and philosophies because someone needs the money. Right? If you're unsure about a loan, hire a professional. I was doing a deal one time, wasn't sure about this property. There was a lot of rehab stuff, and I can look at properties and get a pretty good idea of what stuff costs. I'm not a contractor by any means, but I've rehabbed a few properties to have a general idea. When you get into stuff with foundations and moving stuff and cutting walls out, that's over my head. So what did I do? I paid a contractor that I know a few $100 and said, go to this property for 30 minutes to an hour. And this is what they're telling me they're going to do. And tell me if it's realistic. He called me and said, if they think they're fixing this property for 50 grand, they're dead wrong. What did I do? Walked away from the deal. First couple $100 I spent. Call an inspector out, right? But you can even call and get quotes. Hey, if I were going to fix this house, what would you charge me? Sometimes investors' eyes can be bigger than the actual project, right? And it's not a bad thing, right? They have a vision that I don't have. That's why I'm the lender, not the actual investor. But make sure that if you're not certain about the part of the deal, go get a professional. If you don't know, if they tell you, I'm going to flip this property, I'm going to sell it for $300, call a realtor in the area. Hey, look at this property address. Out of curiosity, if this were fully rehabbed in great condition, what would you list it at? Realtors will be happy to talk you through that stuff, right? Get title insurance. This one baffles me. Right now, if you forego title insurance, you'll have to sign off on it. And I can't tell you, I've seen it quite a bit. You never know what's going to happen, right? So I have seen a scenario with a very close friend of mine's mother, right, that wrote a loan to someone that she knew well for a piece of property secured by property. No title company, no title insurance commitment. Guess what that borrower did? That borrower went out and got a loan on the property at a bank. Why? Because when the bank looked at it and the title company for the bank looked at it, there was no recorded loan on that property. Guess what happened? She just took a back seat to a bank. She went from first position to dead last. You'll never win in that game. If she'd had title insurance, there would have been a recorded note and mortgage. It would have a clear title up to that point, and the next bank that tried to write a loan would have never written the loan because they would have seen that there was an encumbrance on the property. So when we say get title insurance, guess who pays for it? The borrower. This is another one of mine, right? Borrowers say things like, oh, the deal's already tight. Then don't do the deal. You want me to take more risk? You're going to pay me more money? So you want to borrow money from me at the same rate that I would loan it to someone where I had title insurance and you're not going to have title insurance? Why would I ever do that? Now, me, I would never do it, but at least get another 2 or 3% interest out of it. If you want to take more risk, then you should get more reward. Verify that hazard flood insurance is on the property and make sure that your premiums are paid. This one happens all the time, right? Guess what? Borrower tries to cut corners. They try to make a few extra bucks. They don't put insurance on the property, or they put bare bones insurance and you don't know. So what happens? Something happens in the property and you're not insured. It seems crazy, and yes, it's a small percentage of the time that it can happen, but it can happen. Who pays for the insurance? The borrower. This is one that I'm really concerned about right now, is all the things that are going on, right? You've got major insurance hikes, and I feel bad for people owning real estate, right? It's hit me too. But I shouldn't be at more risk because you don't want to carry insurance on a property that I have a loan on. Because if the house burns down, guess what? I ain't getting paid. So make sure, and then same thing with flood insurance. We saw this a lot when the hurricanes came through. Nobody wants flood insurance, but if they live in an area where a bank would require it, you should require it. Because if they're uninsured and that property is underwater and they got no money coming in for it, you think they're going to be paying you back? No. What are they probably going to do? let you have the house. Well, now you just inherited a house with 4 feet of water in it. It's not the house you want to own, right? So insurance is there to protect you from that stuff, but because you're on the lending side, you're not in charge of insurance. The borrower is. So you got to stay on top of your borrowers. Property taxes. Just make sure they're paid. You can go onto the county appraiser's website, right, and just look and see that taxes are paid. This happens all the time. We see tax lien sales on properties, and people are like, what the heck's going on? Well, make sure that your borrower is paying their property taxes. Right? And then last thing is get a personal guarantee. In a lot of private loans, there's no guarantees, and that's not a bad thing. You're paying a higher interest rate, you're loaning more to the asset than the person. All that's fine, but there's nothing wrong with still getting a personal guarantee. Just because they say, oh, my LLC's buying it, well, then you can still put on the guarantee on behalf of your LLC. Nothing preventing them from doing that. I'll pause there. Any questions from here in the room or outside? What you got?
Go back to, you said there's a difference between foreclose and own?
Yep, previous slide.
So what would be the difference between wanting to own and the foreclosure? So number 1 and number 3.
Sure. So the question here is around 1 versus 3. 1 says don't loan if you wouldn't want to own. 1 says do not loan unless you're willing to loan unless you're willing to foreclose. So the difference between that, when we say don't loan unless you're willing to own, it means that if you foreclose, you will likely own that property, right? This one has to do with, will you foreclose on the borrower? So one of these has to do with the property. This has to do with the borrower. Who are you loaning the money to? And because a lot of private loans are usually people with relationships, right? We know each other. Well, will that relationship keep me from foreclosing on you? If the answer is yes, then it's probably not a good thing to do. There's a reason why people say don't do business with family, right? And it's not because things are good. But when things go bad, they go really bad really fast, right? So if I loan money to my brother, which believe it or not, in IRA I'm allowed to do. I can't loan it to my son, I can't loan it to my wife, I can't loan it to my dad, but I can loan it to my brother. If I loan money to my brother and my brother doesn't pay, what's going to happen? Is that going to be a conversation that we have up front? Am I going to foreclose? Am I going to take him to court? Am I going to put him on the street? What am I going to do? That's the problem that most people put themselves into. So the example I gave earlier that I've seen personally is a guy loaned money to the best man at his wedding. They're best buds. Real estate was great. Nobody ever loses money, right? You know, we all know how that song and dance goes. And you know what? In the most part, it's true. But when things go bad, they can go very bad very quickly. So one of the things that you know I can't stress enough is just making sure that if you're going to loan to someone, have that discussion up front. It's why we say in the last slide, have legal draw up the documents. Go line by line in the legal agreement. Hey, if this goes bad, I have to foreclose on you. I want you to know I'm going to foreclose on you. Are you comfortable with that? Because if you're not, we don't have to do the loan. But make sure that you're thinking through that. So yeah, the differences between these two here, they're very similar, but really it's all about reviewing the property in one thought process and reviewing the person as a separate. Other questions? And remember, if you do have them online, we'll take those all at the end. You can type those in as well. Got just a couple slides left. So what does it mean to self-direct? Well, you know, obviously we're here to help you through that process. We have a team on our sales team that can walk you through what the actual account looks like. What are the different types of accounts, right? Why would somebody have one over the other? Why would you have maybe multiple accounts? I mentioned earlier, and I don't think I have a slide on it. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't have a slide on it, but I'll just share, since we've got a couple minutes. I'll share a couple of things that I've done with my own accounts that I think is really important for people to take a look at. So first thing that I did early on was I found someone that was in the business of brokering loans. And I went to them and I let them loan the money out, all with my approval, but I paid them a fee to go find loans. The reason I share that is if you want to be on the lending side, but you don't know where to kind of go and find borrowers, that would be my first place to start, right? Typically, they're called private lenders, hard money lenders, hard money brokers, if you do a quick Google search. But there's a lot of companies out there that will do that for you. And I still invest through some of them. It's way easier. They do all the underwriting. I look at the deal and I get to decide if I want to do it or not. So I can rely on their underwriting, but I can do all my own as well. So I always like those deals because it allows me to be able to not have to go find them, hunt them, underwrite a bunch, but that's using a third party. Second thing is if you have money in multiple accounts, you can combine them on loans, and it's really easy on loans. I personally don't like to combine my different accounts on real estate, right? Because I have some really small accounts like my kids' ESAs and HSA, and it just makes it harder because it divides it up, right? I don't mind combining a few accounts if we're like 50-50, 60-40. But when you get into some of these accounts, I have a few $1,000s in them, it's really hard if the roof blows off and it's $800, like it's just a lot of work. I'd rather do it in accounts where I have, ample cash to make sure I can cover the deal. On the note side though, 99 out of 100 times you're collecting payments. It's easy to split a payment. So if 5 accounts write a loan to a borrower, the borrower can split that payment to each party. And that makes it way easier. Most of the time they set it up at their bank one time and it's, automatic payments come in. So if you have those accounts and different accounts, HSAs and ESAs and other things, you can combine those. And that's something that I've actually been doing. Probably the most things I've done in my retirement accounts is private notes split amongst multiple accounts. And I mentioned this at the beginning. I love private notes because I can also buy them on the secondary market, or I can just buy small pieces of notes. So I'm basically buying a return. I'm just buying a coupon, right? A payment. So the notes as a whole have a lot of opportunities we talked about, but those are just a couple of things that I always like to keep in mind. But as far as getting set up, if you're a current client, we have a notes and real estate team that can walk you kind of through that process, if it's secured or unsecured or what that looks like, what we need. Obviously, we gave you hopefully some good guidelines in terms of underwriting that. If you're not an account holder, we can certainly talk through that process on what that looks like to get set up, so that you can be in a position to go out and find that investment, whether you're going to work through someone that helps you find them and pay them a fee, or whether or not you're going to go find them directly. Either way, both of those work and work very well inside the retirement account. So a couple things. If you text notes to the 407 number there, it'll get you set up in our system, and we'll get you some more content on the note side, as well as a copy of the presentation, just so you have that and you have all the details. But I will pause now. Maggie is in the back from our team, so she's there with some questions, which we'll take, and we've got some folks here internally as well. We can answer some questions. So you want to fire away, Maggie?
Yes. The first question is, why own the note instead of the property?
Great question, right? There's no right answer to this, by the way. Why own the note and not the property? There is no right answer. So to me, there's a few different reasons that you would do one over the other. One, owning real estate is more active than owning notes, right? So from that standpoint, right, we refer to it as toilets and tenants, right, that you have to deal with, versus owning the note, which is in theory just a payment. Reason that I like notes in an IRA is because the interest payments that come in, if I do it outside the IRA, or short-term capital gains tax. If I do it inside the account, I don't pay it. Whereas real estate, if I own it outside of my IRA, I can offset some of the rental income by utilizing some of the tax breaks. But that said, we own about an equal amount of real estate and notes inside our accounts for our clients. It's split almost 50-50. You could flip a coin. So I think it depends on what side you want to be on. I personally like both. I look at the deal and decide. The thing that I like about the note side is a little bit easier for me to turn it. I can write a note for 6 months, 12 months. It's hard to kind of be in the real estate business for 6 months, 12 months. They usually become more long-term real estate deals unless you want to be more actively involved. So it just depends on how you want to make the money. If you want to make the money on the note payment, it'll be net. You'll define what your return is, and you're owed that every month. On the real estate side, you may have a little more upside, but no one owes it to you every month. There's no guarantee, not that there's a guarantee on the note side, but a tenant moves out, there's no rental income, a roof blows off, you got expenses. So just a little bit more passive versus a little bit more active, but both great asset classes.
Perfect.
What else?
Next question, how do I find a note to buy?
So question is, how do I find a note to buy? Great question. I kind of answered that a little bit. So a few things. So there's a few different places that you can go. So the first thing I recommend is, if you're not part of your local real estate investment association, I would look it up and join. There's a couple right here in Central Florida for those that are around our office, but they're all over the place. The National Association of Real Estate, National Real Estate, NAREA, National Real Estate Investor Association, is a great website. I think it's nreia.org. It lists all the member clubs. All the clubs they meet typically monthly. But the reason I point to those is because those are full of real estate investors and people looking for private money. There's also people there that do private loans. And so those are the people I mentioned earlier that you can give basically opportunities for them to place your money, right? So the deal that I always have is that they keep the points, the origination fees, and I keep all the interest. But I don't have to go originate it, so it's a trade-off. But those would be two great places. There's a lot of companies that will help you through the process. There's a technology platform called PaperStack. PaperStack is a secondary market for notes. You can certainly take a look at that. There's a lot of additional groups, not to single them out. There's a lot of different places where people will post them in different crowdfunding places. You can go buy them. You can go invest in the smaller notes in very small increments through Lending Club. I believe it's called out of San Francisco. It's another technology platform, but that's much bigger scale. You're typically not buying a note on a one-off. You're investing bits and pieces into a variety of notes. There's a lot of the marketplace there's a lot of people that like to originate notes and then sell them. And so those are out there. Those would be kind of the starting points that I would take a look at. I'd get to my local investment groups and I'd take a look at some of these technology platforms that originate notes or sell them on the secondary market.
Perfect. Next question. Can I change the terms of a note if I buy it?
The question is, can I change the terms of a note if I buy it? Typically, no, not without the buyer's agreement. So when you have a note, so let's say I wrote a note for 10% interest for $100,000 for 12 months, and I sold that note. If you're the buyer of that note, you can't change the interest to 12%. You can't change it from 12 months to 6 months, right? So unless the terms are already in that existing note, you're buying it as is. Now, you always reserve the right to renegotiate with your borrower and change the terms, but they would have to agree to it. We see this a lot in distressed notes. So if I buy a note that may be in trouble, I may sit down with my borrower and say, hey, if 10% is too much for you to make this deal work, what if I change the note to 5%, right? Less money, you've fallen on some hard times, it makes it easier for you to pay. Or what if I defer 12 months of interest, right? In doing so, what am I getting on the back end, right? So am I going to add a share appreciation clause? So I'm willing to cut on a distress. I want you to keep the asset and try to get it to perform. I'll cut the interest way down. I'll take the payments and push them out. But when you eventually sell the property, I get 25%, right? So I'm going to get paid somewhere, but I'm going to get paid when you get paid. So I'm just realigning the note to match the borrower. Now, I wouldn't do that from the get-go, but if I bought a distressed note at 50 cents on the dollar, I have a lot more luxury of renegotiating, right? So it depends, but on a regular note, no, you cannot just change the terms without borrower consent.
Last question, does collateral have to be real estate?
Great question. So very good questions online today. Does collateral have to be real estate? The answer is no. You can secure a loan by anything, right, that is deemed valuable. the thing that I love about notes and collateral is that I'll secure the loan by anything as long as I know that it means enough to keep the borrower paying me. One of the things that I still think is one of the coolest investments that we see is we have a group of investors that have private loans to restaurants and bars secured by their liquor license. And liquor license, and believe it or not, have been appreciating assets because they only put so many out. So if you want to start a new restaurant, you don't just automatically have a bar license, you have to go get one. And the way that a lot of them are actually being obtained is by buying the liquor license. Right? So if people are trying to buy them to start new businesses, the value of them goes up. So there's a lottery form here in the state of Florida, but it's pretty cool. So the only thing to be aware of is if you do have an asset that is collateral that may not be able to be held in an IRA, then you want to make sure that you have a plan to liquidate it. So for example, like a liquor license can't be owned by an IRA. There's no functional way for that to occur. So in the loan agreement, it states that upon foreclosure, right? Foreclosure is typically a real estate term, but upon foreclosing on that, on a defaulted loan, the liquor license will immediately be liquidated. So they'll find a buyer and they have a third party that they work with that handles that process for them. So the IRA never has to actually take possession of the liquor license because it just doesn't have a place to hold it. So we've seen that. We've seen loans secured by cars and just about anything you can imagine, right? And that's the beauty of collateral. It's the beauty of setting the terms. Willing borrower, willing lender, right? What is it that you need? You need money. What do I need in return? And how do I safeguard that return collateral? Whatever falls in between those decision-making process is between the borrower and the lender, which is pretty cool. Any other questions online? We're looking good. What about live? Any questions, additional questions here? No? Perfect. Well, thank you guys for very much for joining us, both live and in person. We'll see you guys next Tuesday for next week's class. If you're not currently listening to the All About Alts podcast, I would encourage you guys to do that. You can get it on any of the major music platforms, and podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, that sort of thing. But it's called All About Alts, and we talk about really two things. One is investing money outside the stock market, and two is tax efficiency and managing both the investment strategy coupled with good tax efficiency. And so we'd love to have you guys joining us on that. But you can also take a look at our website for our upcoming slate of educational content. We're here to educate you, and hopefully we're here to help you use your retirement account to invest outside the market. So thanks.